For this episode, we are presenting a philosopher still in our midst, Marilyn Friedman. Friedman's writing on communitarianism, or in the case of our primary article against communitarianism, gives us the opportunity to discuss the crossroads of our metaphysical selves with the ethics of the community that shapes our lives and participation in society. This discussion is definitely in the nature versus nurture realm of consideration, but adds that in modern times we have an unprecedented ability to immerse ourselves in subcultures that are chosen rather than circumstantial. How will these curated social groups change us as a society? Let's discuss on From What We've Gathered with Danny Nelson and Kylie Shahar.
In the land of teeter totters, I prefer a slide. Turbulent or gentle waters, let's go for a ride.
Hi, Kylie.
Hi, Danny.
So here's the scenario for this week.
Okay.
Well, it's more of a question to you than a scenario.
Cool.
I know that you grew up in a very urban area, densely populated.
Very densely populated.
Do you think that that shaped you in any kind of way? Like, let's think childhood, because I mean, we could go way back, but let's just say, do you think your childhood was shaped at all by being in an urban area?
For sure. Definitely. I mean, I think, I think for me, and this might be, unique to my situation. Although I grew up in a rather densely populated area with presumably a lot of neighbors and such, we didn't ever know or meet our neighbors or any of the folks on our street, or, I wasn't, hanging out and running around with the neighbor kids. So I think most of my sort of social life was tied to school and friends that I made in school. But so I think
you were in the soccer mom van. You're like, mom, took not necessarily your mom,
right,
but an adult.
Yeah,
you got in the car, you left to go do things.
Yes.
You came home. You weren't
exactly
in the streets.
No, correct. And that's also my mother was really worried about us getting kidnapped. So
my mom was, on the other hand, was hoping we'd get kidnapped. She's like, that'd be interesting. Not in a bad way.
Right.
I don't know what is not a bad way of being kidnapped, but yeah. So essentially, I come from an extremely opposite background of being from rural Alabama, and not super rural. The town that I grew up in, predominantly, which I kind of grew up in two places, but they're small towns. 10 to 15,000 people.
That's small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not, there's more than one stoplight kind of thing.
Right.
But we definitely, my sister and I, you had a bunch of siblings, so that did help with you maybe not being with the neighborhood kids and stuff. And I did have a sister that was very close to me, but we were opposites and we really did not get along very much. But that didn't stop us. We were in the street. We were bicycle gang.
Yeah.
Riding over to the gas station to get 5-cent candy, whatever, free range.
Free.
We were out on the streets,
yeah,
doing whatever we wanted.
Yeah, you were free range. I was cage free. I was cage free. We weren't sort of locked up, but we were not free
leaving
range.
the area.
Yeah,
you were fenced in.
Yeah, we were in our coop, as it were. We had movement within our coop, but we were not sort of, getting into it and all that stuff. So it was mostly hanging out at friends' houses or at the movie theater on the weekends,
sports, whatever. Yeah,
totally. But I think that shaped me, especially now in my adult life where, I've moved around hither and thither. And I feel like regardless of where I am, I'm always trying to meet my neighbors and know people, just kind of for this, community neighborliness, but light, it's diet neighborhood. I'm not trying to be up in everybody's business.
You're I saw this one time in a movie, so I'm trying it out. But you're not the lady who's clipping her hedges while she's staring at everyone coming and going in their driveways.
Exactly. I don't want to know really what's going on with people. I just want to know the people and be able to wave and do that really nice neighborly thing. And I think it's an important part of feeling grounded and anchored like where you're living, is
Absolutely.
to kind of know people around you.
So the reason that we're kind of starting this conversation this way is to introduce this idea of communitarianism. And communitarianism is a newer philosophy. This is a philosophy that has not existed. I mean, essentially the word kind of came about in the late 19th century, but this is really a philosophy that developed in the mid to late 20th century. So the article that we're kind of talking about today, which usually we're really talking broadly about the ideas of a philosopher, but when you're talking about someone who is currently still publishing, in the case of Marilyn Friedman, who works at Vanderbilt, like she doesn't, it's not, you have to go and read specific opinions that she has. Right. And so this paper, Feminism and Modern Friendship, Dislocating the Community, this, is her in the 1980s still making an assessment of how does communitarianism go with feminism?
Yeah.
Because it's still such a new idea that there's a lot of philosophers who are still digging into like, does this jive with my ideas?
Right.
Because it's being vetted
still. Absolutely.
So the whole idea around communitarianism is this idea that it is impossible to be an individual in society, and especially as a human being, because we're just going to agree as a base of being a human being, just for the sake of this episode, that part of being a human being is having reasoning, which means that you're a part of civilization. So you have reasoning, you're within society. And the idea of communitarianism is that because of that, once you are in existence, your community is then influencing who you are as a person and who you are as an individual, which then influences how you participate in society. Right. So I like this whole thing because it's this kind of like crossroads with your metaphysical self and your ethical self, and so metaphysics in its like smallest form is essentially dealing with existence. How do we exist? How does anything exist? Not just do we exist, but how do we exist? How do other things exist? And then ethics is how we're participating in society. So once we are a human being and we have reasoning, how do we take that personhood and that ability to understand society and then participate in it? And of course, part of the reason philosophy is so interesting is because this constantly has to be reassessed in accordance to what society is right now. Like what the ethics that worked in, 54 BC are not the same ethics that work right now. In 15th century Russia, murder was legal. Right. It was not technically illegal to murder someone. Yeah. Like it wasn't on the books as like an offense, So of course that would not fly now, like that's just, society changes. And then the way that we formulate ethics and the way we participate with ethics changes. And that's the point of communitarianism, is they're saying you as an individual are affected immediately from not only the time that you're born, but then also in proportion, you're not just a single little point on a map. You're actually a web. Right. You are not only affected by all of the community that's around you, you are also affecting the community around you. Right. Siblings. Yeah. Would your siblings be the same people if you weren't in their life? Yeah. So that idea and that like kind of combination of those two places, and of course you can go down a long, way about like the personality types that might spring out of these, because how does one person come up as a completely normal, right. I'm going to use fake air quotes, auditory air quotes, normal person, and then their siblings a serial killer. Right. How do those two people come from the exact same household? There's circumstantial things and personality types that are like, don't necessarily fit in. But this idea of communitarianism is not just that it makes you and shapes you in a positive way. It's also resistance of the ways that you might be brought up and stuff. So when you are talking about growing up in an urban area, not necessarily knowing your neighbors and all that kind of stuff, you might be more interested in your neighbors now because
Right.
you didn't have that
Yeah, for sure.
before. Do you think that that's a good description of kind of the concept of communitarianism?
Yeah, that sounds right. I mean, just a different way of putting the very same idea, or not so different way of putting the very same ideas. It's like there's this like common adage that no person is an island, right?
Yes.
That's like a kind of slogan-y way of putting this idea that, when we come into this world where we're already sort of, kind of like prefabricated into society, which, society is made up of a bunch of different entities, right? The family, neighborhood, the church, maybe local government, friends, right? All these institutions that make up society. When we're born, as we live, as we grow up, we are sort of like inextricably enmeshed in this web of all of these different institutions and influences. And so when we're thinking about identity or like who we are as individuals, that kind of like you were saying, metaphysical conception of the self, what am I sort of kind of question.
Absolutely.
The communitarian's going to say, well, in order to understand like what you are, right, who you are, in order to kind of understand your identity as an individual, you cannot necessarily separate yourself from your social web, from your community. And so it's a radical rejection of this kind of abstract idea of individualism, right? Despite the fact that in this tradition, right, in the liberal tradition, right, we're really defined by this idea of individual rights, individual liberties. And it's like, well, in spite of all that, we are not individuals in this radical sense. We are always enmeshed in this web of these relations. And so to understand the metaphysical question of like, what is my identity as a subject? Well, it's one that is defined by your community, right? These social relationships.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, a natural question that follows the question, like, what am I? Who am I? Is how should I live my life now that I sort of know all of these, like that I am in this web of relations? Like, how should I live?
And you think too, when people, when you're introduced to people, you're not going up to people and they are like, this is Kylie. Mm-hmm. She is a human.
Right.
This is a person who is a human.
Yeah.
They're saying, they're identifying you within a social sphere.
Exactly.
They're saying, this is Kylie.
Yes.
She is a professor.
Yes.
She lives in Alabama.
Right.
She, likes cats.
Right, exactly.
She loves cats.
She
loves her cat.
She does.
So even within that, we identify ourselves that way. But this additional, when I talk about it being a crossroads and a crossover, it's almost where that reaching out from metaphysics into ethics that happens with theology.
Absolutely.
Where theology is really, to me, they're moral documents. They're for people to understand how to morally behave with the world. Thus, is an ethical, is an ethical quandaries and such. Yeah. And many times, people's religions or the theology that they look into does prescribe kind of ideas about metaphysics.
Yes.
And what you are reaching for through ethical behavior is this kind of metaphysical existence outside of that. And so what I like about communitarianism is like they're saying that's, again, church is another one of these webs that kind of make you who you are. Absolutely. And again, that might be the absence of church.
Right, absolutely.
Making you who you are.
Absolutely.
Maybe there are people out there who needed an ethical map that never received one that would have changed their behavior in positive ways that we'll never know because that's just not the existence that they had. Yeah. And so just to, I want to tell you a little bit about Marilyn Friedman, born in 1945. She is the W. Alton Jones Chair of Philosophy at Vanderbilt University. The little bit of salacious gossip I could find was that she moved to Canada in 1968 for political reasons. So there was a whole portion of her career where she was teaching in Canada and philosophy and stuff. So once she came back to the States in the 80s was really where you see a lot of her publishing start happening. And she's really focused on feminism and has like she has a long-term project she's been doing that's about women and terrorism, which I think could be fascinating. Yeah. Anyway, this is the person who we're kind of looking at, friendship, and she has a whole book on friendship, and that is something that I encourage you to go out and look at. But this is one segment of her ideas around friendship, which is that, so we just told you all about communitarianism. You grow up in this, you're living in it, it's your family, your friends, all your people. And her ideas around that is because of modernity, like because of the society that we live in, friends have now taken the place of a lot of these traditional web kind of spots. Yeah. And that has to do with a lot of things. One is urbanization is a huge part of the way that cultures move. And in the past, when people urbanize, meaning they go into city structures, it's usually because there's like droughts, and then they're going to find work. They're going to get help. There's war everywhere. So they're urbanizing because they need to get away from areas that might be, scary or whatever. So these ideas that have traditionally migrated people might still exist in some ways, but a huge part of urbanization is just people finding subcultures that they identify with. Right. So, there's lots of people who come up, it might be gender stuff, it might be sexuality stuff, it might just be you really love water polo. Right. And the only, you're from a town of 15,000 people, getting a water polo team together. Yeah. Seems pretty impossible. For sure. It might be that you're really into live music. Right. Music. In my case, it was a huge thing that pushed me towards cities. Is just being able to see live music on a regular basis, and really good live music.
Yeah. That helps.
You move to the right cities, you get to have more of it. And so her belief is that now, instead of your aunt being the one who's teaching you how to can your vegetables or whatever. What do aunts teach people?
Yeah, knitting maybe, I think. I'm pretty sure it's in the handbook.
One of my favorite aunts just taught me about yard selling, although I've not really put it into action as much, as her style was to get up at 6 a.m. on a Saturday.
Oh, no.
Of course not. No. You would never.
No.
You would 100%. No. You're like the word 6 a.m. coming out of my mouth.
Absolutely not.
You're like, that might be when I go to bed.
Go to bed. Yeah, exactly.
I'm not getting up to yard sale, that's for sure. Absolutely. But anyways, those same positions might be taken by friends where you have this kind of other culture where you've found people. And then with the social culture we now have on the internet, there's this whole other level of people, of subculture. Right. And the thing that happens is once you find those people where you're like, these are my people, right, then you kind of pull away from all of this tradition, what was the traditional community, right, which then eventually morphs all of society. Yes. The more people who leave these traditions, the more that we're leaving and changing. Right. And there are lots of times that this can happen in negative ways too. Yes. What about the person who becomes friends with their neighborhood crackhead pack? Right. Meth is real dangerous, y'all.
It's really bad.
Don't be out there doing meth.
This is our dare moment.
So these subcultures aren't, although we traditionally, go into a mindset of optimism, because that's just being a person, we have this desire to think of best case scenario. Some of these subcultures are very negatively impactful. Joining a cult. Right. You find your people, and then all of a sudden you look up one day and you're like, why did I just pay this person $50,000 to, whatever. Yeah, right. I mean, I've never had that. Just to let you guys know, I've not. Just to let you know. Although if you want to give someone $50,000 for their leadership qualities,
the QR code is on. The QR code to donate is on socials. Both of us are accepting. We are willing.
We're willing.
We're willing.
We're willing. We're here for you. So one of the things where she was, kind in this article where she discusses this idea that friendship really are the things that take us out of that is more in the context of, in her opinion, people who leave their original areas
Right.
to then go into these kind of subcultures. And she talks about this as being voluntary,
Yeah.
as rather than circumstantial,
Right.
meaning like, you know, in the past,
Yes.
people were born on a farm. They may go to school till 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And so even saying there's a grade or a
Mm-hmm.
school at all, you know, that's also just even bringing it into kind of a modern time.
Right.
But you're born on the farm. You might know a story. You have of someone, oh, they woke up, they left, they became famous, whatever. But that's every once in a while that might happen. But that's not the rule of thumb.
Yeah.
Most people are born somewhere. They have the society that they are with, and then that becomes their life.
Yeah.
And when you talk about like when you talk about thousands of years, millennia, there's probably a serfdom. There's a whole peasantry.
For sure.
Again, were there individuals who got out of this? Were there, you know, Galileos? Were there, you know, Epictetuses that were born into slavery and found their way out through their intellect? Absolutely. But those were one in millions of people who kind of left that servitude and changed classes. And because the middle class didn't even exist thousands of years ago. So, you know, there's this kind of ruling class and serf class. And so, you know, until the last 100 years, that completely got flipped. Because of industrialization, all of those things. But Friends coming and creating this, you know, there's two parts. The really healthy part of that is you're able to leave these patriarchal, because of course, she's a feminist philosopher. She talks about escaping these patriarchal, you know, whether it was the church, the way you were brought up in church, your home, you were brought up in your home, the approval or disapproval of the community that you're in, of what you are. I mean, think about the 90s with the whole... Like, if you liked video games and dressed in black and were like gothy, all of a sudden you might be a murderer. Like, you know, because there was the whole craze around, you know, presuming that these were bad people because of Columbine or like whatever.
Yeah.
And so the you know, her idea of what's really positive about communitarianism in the modern age is that you can then go find your friends and all those people who are disapproving of you, your preacher, your pastor, your father. I mean, of course, this isn't me, preacher. No. Yes, I was asked not to come back to Sunday school. It's fine. I asked too many questions.
We don't talk about it.
We don't talk about it. That's for later. But then you go into these voluntary communities and there's an enrichment that makes you a better individual, which is then making society better. But it's also making it more segmented. More segmented than it's ever been. Because when are you now crossing over into people who are not in your subgroup?
Yes. So this is like, you might think the kind of modern idea of like an echo chamber.
Yes.
I mean, to take one small dimension of it, is like now maybe perhaps we are able to sort of more intentionally curate our social relationships, voluntarily so, in the most sort of robust sense, and perhaps because we have so much more community at our disposal in terms of the internet and where we choose to focus our attention, you could sort of undermine, you might think, this kind of like wider of a net, wider of a web that used to be, you might say used to be, I don't know how far in the past, but used to be the quote unquote norm. Now it's these like hyper focused, sort of ultra curated kinds of, you might think, realities that we can construct for ourselves on the basis of, and this is the metaphysical point, like your reality is sort of constituted by the social relations and roles and contexts that you choose to put yourself in. And for some, there are this is just the critical approach, there's a sense in which this is so wonderful because it can kind of be this remedy or antidote for a lot of things that were not great for people. But then at the same time, it comes potentially with a cost. And that cost is that you're sort of less exposed to things that you don't like.
Yeah.
And that don't challenge you.
And then you're intolerant of them.
Yeah, right.
All of a sudden,
Right,
you went
good.
from being someone
Yeah.
who's like, oh, I'm the chillest of all people,
Right.
to like one person says something
Yeah.
that you don't agree with, and
Right.
then all of a sudden you're like,
Yeah.
I have no tolerance. Like, I
Right.
cannot
Even hear it, right? Yeah.
that someone would ...
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
that whatever that thing is. I don't even want to bring up.
Right, I
I don't
know.
even want to bring in this house whatever
Right.
that thing is that might be resistant towards.
Yeah.
So what I really liked about this exercise of having somebody like looking at someone who is a more modern philosopher and stuff is that a lot of what we've talked about leading up to this episode are these kind of distant ideas that have already shaped society.
Yeah.
We're already in a becoming.
Yeah.
You know, thousands, hundreds, decades.
Yeah.
You know, coming to, and getting to be around modern philosophers and looking at like what their studies are and what, you know, is taking interest in.
Right.
You know, those ideas can feel far away in a society where academia is kind of separate
Yeah.
from what is actually happening. Does that feel, I don't know. Sometimes I feel that way
Yeah.
with where we are and what that is, but
Yeah. It's like studying things in a petri dish.
yeah.
Almost.
I mean, it is
Right.
the physics of the mind.
But I mean, I think there's so much rich stuff in this article, and I think like one sort of zooming out from the specifics of the content, like one thing that's really interesting that Friedman does in this paper is sort of take up this framework of communitarianism, take it up with this like perspective of how does this jive with or pose blocks and barriers to other things that I've been thinking about, you know, in terms of Friedman herself, right? So it's like, so she's sort of exploring this landscape of communitarianism from her kind of feminist standpoint and thinking like, okay, how do these things cohere with each other, right? Like how do they sort of blend or fit nicely like puzzle pieces?
Yep.
But also let's be critical of this framework of communitarianism from feminist standpoint. Yeah. And so it's like, there's this really like lovely and compelling and plausible view that our identities are formed and forged and reinforced in our social relations. No person is an island. Like we are not radical individuals.
Yep.
We are individuals in a web of social relations. But then like, what are the pitfalls of that? Well, historically, a lot of these social roles and relationships have been terrible for women.
Yeah, absolutely. So she's like, first of all, I don't want to just even discuss communitarianism in a positive light when you're overlaying it in history.
Yeah.
Because it was all based on a society of rules that
disadvantaged
50% of the population.
Exactly. Right. And so if you're, and like we were talking about this metaphysical aspect to communitarianism, if your identity, your sort of reality, your existence is defined by these social roles, well, if you grow up in a society where your worldview is me as a woman, I am supposed to do X, Y, and Z. I'm supposed to get married to a man, right? And then once I'm married to this man, I take up this very particular role, which could be like, I am at his service, right?
Yep.
I am like, this is my identity is to serve, right? My identity is to be at the beck and call. My identity is to receive like a vacuum for Christmas, right? Like, that's
your
right?
identity is to reproduce.
Right, exactly. And then as you said too, right? Like we have these unique personalities that sometimes, you know, are like independent of these social roles. And you might think like, what the hell? I don't want this. I don't want this for me, despite the fact that this is kind of defining who I am. I reject this. And so then for some, right, like you might even think of Wollstonecraft and her kind of critiques of marriage, right?
Yeah.
She's like, marriage is a relationship, historically, is a relationship that puts women in, like, that makes women dependent on men and makes them dependent on men in a way that like truncates and limits their personal flourishing. And so like reject that, right? Reject that your identity is defined by these social roles.
And Friedman discusses this as hyper individualism.
Yeah.
And so one of her things with kind of being like, well, I don't know if I agree with this. This is part of, like I said in the intro, her kind of resistance also to this idea is, if all of these things are true, like you were saying, where do these hyper individualistic people come from?
Right.
And they can be positive or negative.
Mm-hmm.
They can be very positive in the way that like Wollstonecraft was like, I'm going to start fighting for the rights of women.
Yeah.
But how does she wake up one day and just disagree with reality?
Yeah.
Because that's essentially what she's doing. She's waking up and being like, this is not the reality that has to exist.
Right.
But there are people who are these hyper individuals that are also negatively so, right? Like they do not have any empathy.
Right.
There's no empathy within them.
Yeah.
And so they're very destructive in many ways. And you know, that's a whole kind of area that she goes into with that is like, those are the people who are the change makers, though.
Yeah, right.
In good and bad ways, because you know, there are plenty of times where people might dig in their heels,
right,
and just say, well, now girls don't get to go to school anymore. In the case of like certain types of religions,
right,
where they're like, oh, if what school is going to do is cause this individualism, then
we can't have that.
That is now, right.
It's a threat to like the social order of things,
right?
And and so we'll just but that doesn't seem good.
That doesn't, if you're looking at the virtue kind of description, you know, what is virtuous about this world. So these are the kind of, this is exactly what Friedman is bringing about. And this is, again, when we, you know, bringing it back to friendship and the idea of friends is finding the people when you are someone who wakes up in that web.
Right.
And is like, this is not supposed to be my web.
Yeah.
You have people to go to understand that, to help you transition in good and bad ways.
Yeah.
Again,
stay
off the meth streets, folks.
We're just trying to be a good friend
I'm
here.
not telling you what to do. I'm just asking you for society.
Yeah.
And your teeth.
Yeah. Yes.
Those two.
But
also at me if you're like, I know
plenty
facts.
of
great things about that. So I want to go ahead. Oh, this your little kind of like applied philosophy for this week.
Yeah.
I really hope that you guys will go and assess what your web is.
Yeah.
What are the people that you keep around? Do you call your mom once a week? Do you still have, you know, are you close to your sibling? Do you have a text chain with your siblings that's hit up every single day?
Yeah.
Who are the people or the organizations that have an effect on your daily life? Like, who is making you who you are? And if you look at that web and some of those things, you're like, oh, that's not actually good that I participate in that.
Yeah.
You know, like, my taxes take so many of my dollars. Like, maybe I just don't participate. I'm just kidding. I'm in Alabama, so I have to make those kind of jokes. I feel like
it's obligatory.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. those land.
Exactly. Yeah. Those, you know, we got to have them. Or I can say War Eagle to the right folks.
Right. Exactly.
I can't say the other, or else I'll be disowned.
Right. From this town.
So,
yeah.
I want to go ahead and say thank you to Kylie for being here.
Thank
you to Marilyn Friedman. If for any reason you hear us and you're like, that's terrible, we'd love to have you.
Yes. We
properly
thank you
represent.
So much. Yes, Professor Friedman, for your incredible contributions to this literature and to a critical feminist approach to communitarianism. I mean, I think it's apt and raises so many interesting reflective questions that can be revisited. Right?
Absolutely.
Today in 2025.
Today in 2025.
Yes.
This is the time that we are trying to make all of this.
Yes.
What is the modern
Yeah.
social set of rules?
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah.
But thank you to Sam for our music. Thank you so much to Tyler Olson for his audio help. And thank you all to you for listening.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you all.
Have a good rest of your day.